Hey guys, welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Sorry for the delay, had a bit of a crazy month, but I'm back to making build guides. As far as the build goes, it's honestly a favorite of mine. Arc 3.0 on Hunter is really great, and this is kind of the happy medium that I found in between maximum damage melee builds and just overall raw utility. And it's something I think that works great in both mid and high level content. Getting right to our super and abilities today, I'm personally using Gathering Storm. If you want to use standard arc staff, you can. Gathering Storm, in my opinion, is not only great for just single target passive damage, but also just really good ad clear as well. As far as other abilities, you can really use whatever jump or whatever grenade you want to use. I highly recommend Storm Grenade, as I think it's the best arc grenade personally. For your other abilities though, we're going to be using the Gambler's Dodge, which whenever we dodge an enemy, it gives us back our melee charge, and Combination Blow. And this is to help us increase our overall melee damage as we get kills. For aspects, we're using Lethal Current, and basically after you dodge, your next melee has increased range and damage, and also jolts the target, which has a lot of utility benefits. And also whenever you damage a jolted target, it also blinds them, which is just nice in all levels of content. The other aspect is flow state, and simply put, whenever you defeat a jolted target, it makes you amplified. Basically, this is just something we have to trigger once, and then we never have to worry about it again. And the other effect of flow state is while we're amplified, our dodge recharges more quickly, we're more resilient while we're dodging, and our reload speed is greatly increased, which we're going to be taking advantage of in a few different ways. As far as fragments go, I'm using Spark of Resistance just to have some increase in our damage resist whenever we're surrounded by combatants. Next is Spark of Amplitude. Basically, when we get a rapid kill while we're amplified, it generates an Orb of Power, and we're going to be stacking this with a few other effects and a few other mods, basically making our orb gen absolutely insane for us on our fire team. The next is Spark of Frequency. Whenever we get a melee hit, it greatly increases our reload speed, and this can stack with flow state. And again, since we're always amplified, basically we're gonna have increased reload speed across the board, and whenever we get a melee, that reload speed is basically gonna double. It's actually ridiculous how fast you can reload some things with this. Then we have Spark of Magnitude, just to allow our Storm Grenade to last longer. Again, if you want to use a different grenade or a different mod, something like Spark of Shock is always good. Spark of Ions also works really well because we're gonna be jolting a lot of stuff with this build anyway. One thing you might be wondering is, if we're gonna use Combination Blow, why don't we use Spark of Feedback? In truth, Spark of Feedback is very strong. It provides a 75% damage increase to your melee after you get hit by an enemy. The problem though is that melees are incredibly inconsistent in this game, meaning that Spark of Feedback isn't always procced by the same melee, and it's also really inconsistent at proccing in the first place. And even stuff, for example, like boss stomps, which would seem like a reliable way to actually get this thing procced, don't actually work with Spark of Feedback. It has to be a very specific kind of melee that hits you. Onto our helmet, and our exotic for today is Assassin's Cowl. In short, your powered melee final blows and finishers grant you health and invisibility, and any kind of final blow or finisher against a more powerful combatant like a champion, for example, grants you even more health and even greater invisibility duration. Getting right into the mods then for today. Our first is Striking Light. While we're charged with light and we defeat a combatant with melee damage, it consumes one stack of charge with light and spawns in an orb of power for our allies. This is a very powerful mod, but often requires a lot of setup in order to use it properly, because every melee kill requires at least one stack of charge with light in order to actually spawn that orb of power, meaning we need to have an effective way of actually getting stacks of charge with light very quickly. And with this build, we more than take care of that, so don't worry about it. Next is Hands On. Just again, since this is a melee build, it helps us get our super back, which is great for single target passive damage, and also just really good at ad clear as well. And then we're also using Harmonic Siphon, which just allows for rapid final blows with any arc weapon to gen us orbs for us and our allies. But as you can already see, with Harmonic Siphon, with Striking Light, and then with our fragment Spark of Amplitude, it allows for near constant orb of power gen, and the super gain for us and our allies is ridiculous. Onto our gauntlets is Melee Wellmaker, and this just helps the whole build kind of fit together perfectly. It allows our powered melee final blows to generate those arc elemental wells that kind of fuel this whole setup in the first place. The other mod we're using is Impact Induction. Basically causing damage with a melee attack reduces our grenade cooldown, and since we're constantly spamming our melee with this build, it's going to help us get our grenade back really quickly. As far as other mods, if you'd rather use something like another stack of Impact Induction, if you want to use something else for champions like I'm particularly using an anti-barrier scout rifle. Whatever you prefer, if you want to use loaders and benefit that reload speed, you can totally use that too. Onto our chest piece, our first mod is Elemental Charge. Basically, picking up an Arc Elemental grants us 2 stacks of charge with light, and this works perfectly with Striking Light and Melee Wellmaker, basically creating an infinite chain where every single melee that we actually hit is going to be spawning an Orb of Power through Striking Light alone. And we combine this with Spark of Amplitude, making every single melee kill that we get in the game at least one Orb of Power, and it's very common you'll spawn multiple. The other nice thing with this build too is that it doesn't really suffer from hyper-aggression that a lot of melee builds actually suffer from greatly. Most melee-based builds, you need to be in the face of ads at all times. You need to constantly be putting yourself on the front lines and in danger. With this build though, you have near constant health regen from just simply getting a melee kill or a finisher, and whenever you get those, it grants you invisibility, which is the best PvE perk in the entire game, hands down. This allows you to basically continue that melee chain infinitely without any real threat from any adds. And again, we're already buffing our melee through combination blow, an additional mod that I'm going to showcase later on, but you can always use something like tractor cannon 1-2 punch and just make your melee hit for even more damage. And in my opinion, anything below master level content, this build is overkill. It's insanely powerful, insanely easy to use, and has a ton of benefits for both you and your fire team. For our legs, our first mod is firepower. This is just something I kind of threw in there to help get our grenade back even faster, and it consumes 1 stack of charge with light when you use our grenade and grants our grenade 20% instant ability regen. As far as other mods go, I'm using 2 stacks of innervation, which reduce our grenade cooldown each time we pick up an orb of power, again benefiting from all the orb of power gens that we're using with this build. Onto our cloak. Our first mod is Well of Ions, and this is going to buff our next outgoing melee by 30% every time that we pick up an Arc Elemental Well. And again, since we're genning that well every other melee kill, every other melee that we're actually doing is increased by 30% just at base. All in all, this is a fantastic mod for this build, just increasing the quality of life and potency of it. Plus, you'd be surprised just how much a 30% increase to our melee can actually be. As far as other mods go, I'm using Bad Amplitude, which whenever we damage a champion with an arc ability, which can be our melee or a grenade, it causes that champion to become jolted, which is again just that debuffing effect that we can take advantage of intrinsically. And then our final mod is Surge Detonators, just allowing our arc grenade to stun overload champions. Again, one thing I wanted with this build was the ability to take it into higher end content and basically just fit it for whatever kind of champions or mods that we might need. So again, Surge Detonators is always useful. If you want to swap that out, you can also use something like Lightning Strikes Twice, just to help with your grenade regen with this build especially, because we're basically always going to be getting arc kills. Onto the weapons with this build. The first one I'm recommending is a 1-2 punch shotgun. I personally like the Wastelander here, but really any shotgun works. 1-2 punch is a fantastic mod to put with this build because after landing a shot, it allows your next melee to do 3 times the damage. And again, that's also potentially buffed by Well of Ions and combination blows effect, being that your melee can easily hit into the hundreds of thousands, even without something like Liar's Handshake actively working with it. If you don't want 1-2 punch though, you can definitely use something like the No Reprieve shotgun here. I have mine with Pugilist, Swashbuckler, and Right Hook. The shotgun mainly so we can also benefit from Unstoppable Shotgun if we need to, and this roll is pretty insane for it. Pugilist just allows final blows with the weapon to give you melee energy back in case you break that melee dodge chain, and dealing melee damage improves the weapon's handling, which basically means this weapon will always have better handling with this build. Swashbuckler is just going to have this weapon do increased damage whenever we get a melee kill, and since this is a melee build, we're constantly going to be chaining, this weapon always does increased damage. And Right Hook just allows any kind of melee damage that we deal to give this weapon increased target acquisition and range for a short period of time, and the more that we damage enemies with our melee, the more this extends this duration. And in short, what this means is that this weapon basically has all 3 of these perks active all the time with a build like this. Overall, a great substitution if you're not interested in using a 1-2 punch shotgun. As far as other weapons go, you can really use whatever you want to benefit the build. I'm personally going with Tarnished Metal, again Scout Rifle just to help with anti-barrier Scout Rifle. This weapon also has the origin trait Right Hook, giving it compatibility with our melee build. And I personally went with the Demolitionist Volt Shot roll, which I will be doing double enhanced whenever I get it up to level. Demo just to help regen our grenade with this build, and Volt Shot is just a great PvE perk with really good ad clear, and also utility with the jolting effect. As far as heavy weapons go, Storm Chaser has always been a great option. It's something I always recommend for arc-based builds. It has a wide variety of perks to help benefit solo and fire team play, and it's just a really good weapon being a linear fusion rifle. If you want to go full melee, I highly recommend Tractor Cannon. 1-2 punch Tractor Cannon is going to increase your melee damage by a 3 times multiplier and a 1.3 times multiplier. And again, you can also rock any kind of shotgun supporting mods like reserves, loaders, or finders, and benefit both this and your 1-2 punch shotgun at the same time. The other shotgun I recommend is Legend of Acreus, specifically with the Catalyst. Acreus, with its new Catalyst and some changes, gives it Trench Barrel, and this thing with Trench Barrel is absolutely disgusting. If you wanted to, you could also rock something like Font of Might with this build and basically give this thing a 25% weapon damage buff nearly constantly with the arc melee gen that we have. But that's pretty much it for the build, guys. Like I said, this is basically my go-to build for any kind of mid to even high level content I'm looking to use arc specifically for. Again, there are risks that come with melee builds, but with this build granting us invis and basically constant health regen, a lot of the risks that come with melee builds, especially in higher end content, basically disappear while using this thing. It's overall one of my favorites and a go-to anytime that I'm looking for an arc build, specifically a hunter. Not only does this build provide a lot of potential and support for both solo and fire team play, but it allows for a lot of customization as there isn't really any kind of restrictions for weapons or even playstyle with this, and a few of the mods, like I said earlier, can always be swapped out to benefit your playstyle. Let me know what you guys thought of the build down below, as well as any comments for future videos. Again, getting back into the swing of things, I would love to see what you guys want to see next. Thank you guys so much for watching the build guide. I greatly appreciate your support, and I'll catch you in the next one.